They once lived in the shadows, where a tissue box was their entire world. And then one day, the house was gone, and the tiny family lost everything. Beat pause. Gentle, hopeful music begins to rise. But hidden between the towering legs of tables and chairs, beneath water droplets, cookie crumbs, and a beam of morning light, they didn't just find shelter. They found something far more magical, a forgotten dollhouse, and a home made of love, trust, and second chances. This is not just a story to hear. It's one to feel, with every tiny heartbeat that lights up a great big world. Whispers beneath the floorboards. A bedtime tale of the littlest hearts. The world was still, and in the stillness, the smallest breaths of the smallest beings echoed like wind through blades of grass. At the edge of the kitchen windowsill, just beyond the reach of curious eyes and careless cleaning cloths, 4 tiny figures lay curled in makeshift beds, crafted from a lemon-scented dusting rag and the wispy feathers of an old duster. It was there, in a crevice of forgotten cloth and gentle light, that the Willow family had made their temporary home. They were not like you and me. Elliot, the father of the household, stood no taller than a paperclip and carried wisdom in his eyes like an old oak carries rings. His wife, Nora, was a creature of softness and grace, with a voice that calmed and hands that mended. Their children, Theo, thoughtful and curious, and Lila, fearless with a heart open to wonder, had never known a world beyond walls and floorboards. And yet, everything had changed. Just a month ago, the Willows had been nestled comfortably inside an old tissue box at the back of a kitchen cupboard. It was dark, quiet, and safe, their version of a warm country cottage. There, they had lived for years in undisturbed bliss, while the elderly humans who owned the house lived their slow, quiet lives above and around them. Then came the moving van, with thundering boots and boxes that scraped like thunder. The old couple vanished into memory. Their cupboards were emptied, their items carried out one by one. When the Willows returned from a stroll behind the baseboard that afternoon, they found their home gone. The tissue box gone, the cupboard empty, their belongings scattered or crushed. For the briefest of moments, they stood still, 4 figures no larger than thumbtacks, watching the great emptiness where their life had once been. Nora was the first to speak. "It's gone," she whispered. But Elliot, always steady, looked up at the wide kitchen ahead and said only, "Then it's time to begin again." And so they did. They spent the next night hidden behind a broom under the fridge, and then a few days tucked inside the folds of a dish towel. But it was Elliot who suggested the windowsill. "Let the light wake us," he said, "before the giants do. Let us greet the day on our terms." And that's how they ended up here, under lemon-scented linen, beside a bottle of cleaner and a bar of unused soap, dreaming under the stars. Tonight, the window had grown cold with dew. Outside, the moonlight painted the garden silver. Inside, the hum of the refrigerator was a lullaby, and the scent of rosemary from a nearby countertop still lingered from the humans' dinner. Nora slept with her face nestled into the cloth, her chest rising and falling in a quiet rhythm. With each exhale, a corner of the yellow rag lifted like a sail catching the wind. Elliot, ever watchful, lay beside her with one hand resting on hers, not out of fear, but out of quiet devotion. Just a breath away, Lila slept in a cradle made from feather strands, dreaming of galaxies. Theo lay curled beside her, his knees tucked in, murmuring softly in sleep. Even in slumber, he looked as though he were pondering mysteries beyond his size. This wasn't the home they had planned, but it was a place to rest. And for now, that was enough. The new human family had moved in a week after the Willows lost their cupboard. They were different, younger, livelier, louder. The mother, Emma Marsh, was in her early 30s and moved with the grace of someone carrying both hope and fatigue. Her daughter, Sophie, barely 5, had a giggle that could rattle crumbs off a table. The Willows had watched them cautiously at first, peeking through cabinet cracks and behind stovepipes. But what they saw softened their hearts. Sophie laughed often and cried without shame. Emma read stories to her every night, stories of dragons and dancing bears and magical trees that whispered secrets. She kissed her daughter on the forehead and waited until Sophie fell asleep before tiptoeing away. And the Willows listened. Each night, Theo and Lila would sneak to the bookshelf and sit among the spines like bookends, listening to the human stories with wonder. It reminded them, oddly, of home, of when Elliot would tell bedtime tales of daring bees and dancing socks, and Nora would tuck them into thimble-sized hammocks with warm string quilts. Now, their beds were rags and feathers, but their hearts were still full. And tomorrow, they'd begin searching, not just for a place to sleep, but for a place to live, a home of their own. Each member had already chosen a possible location to explore. Elliot had mentioned the warmth of a place behind the kitchen boiler. Nora had her eye on the china cupboard with its shelves full of forgotten treats. Theo was fascinated by the living room and something he'd called the giant water box. And Lila, well, she hadn't said yet, but she had that look. The look she got before she discovered something wonderful. For now, though, they slept. The kind of deep sleep that only comes after loss, and the quiet bravery of choosing joy again anyway. Outside, the world turned slowly. Inside, 4 hearts beat in perfect time. The Willow family had lost a house, but they hadn't lost each other. And that, Elliot believed, was how new stories began. Whispers beneath the floorboards, a bedtime tale of the littlest hearts. The first light came softly, brushing the windowsill in streaks of pale gold, like paint from an invisible brush. Inside the folds of the yellow cleaning rag, Nora stirred. Her lashes fluttered, and a sigh escaped her lips. Not a sigh of worry, but one of quiet contentment, the kind that rises when a soul remembers it is safe. Beside her, Elliot had already awoken, as he often did before the sun. But he never moved right away. He simply watched the light come in. For Elliot, dawn was more than a time of day. It was a promise that no matter how small they were, or how uncertain life might become, morning would always return. One by one, the rest of the family began to stir. Lila yawned first, curling her legs and arms in a stretch that reached every inch of her tiny frame. Her hair, as fine as a spider's thread, glowed in the sunlight. Theo blinked, rubbed his eyes, and sat up with a gentle groan. Smells like morning, he murmured. Morning smells like lemon and sunshine, Lila said, grinning. From their perch on the windowsill, the world looked different, grand, sacred, alive. The backyard, to human eyes, was a simple suburban garden, a modest patch of grass, a few rose bushes, and a small stone fountain in the middle. But to the Willows, it was a kingdom. The lawn became an emerald meadow stretching for miles. The roses were redwood forests, towering and crowned with ruby blossoms. And the shed beyond? A royal fortress, painted in a regal shade of chestnut red. "Look," Theo whispered, pointing out the glass. "It's glowing." The sun had risen just enough to catch the water spilling from the fountain's top. It sparkled like falling diamonds, droplets tumbling over the edges of a carved stone pineapple into a shallow basin below. The sound of it, faint and trickling to the human ear, was, to the willows, the mighty roar of a waterfall, their very own Niagara Falls. And every morning since moving to the windowsill, they had gathered to watch it. "Time for our ritual," Elliot said, rising slowly. One by one, the family sat cross-legged in a row along the sill, their legs tucked beneath them, their eyes fixed outside. No one spoke, not right away. In that silence, there was something holy. Sunlight warmed the windowsill beneath them, and beams of light danced across their faces. Lila tilted her head, letting the rays fall over her cheek. Nora reached out and gently squeezed Elliot's hand. "It never gets old," she said. "It's different every day," he replied, "but it always brings peace." Theo, ever thoughtful, spoke next. "Do you think the girl, Sophie, watches it too?" Nora smiled. "Maybe, but I think she watches with different eyes." "Big eyes," Lila giggled. "Human-sized eyes." "No," Elliot said softly. "Not just big, busy. They don't get to see what we see." "What do we see?" Lila asked. Theo answered, surprising even himself. "We see with wonder." The words landed like a hush in the air, and everyone nodded. The sun climbed higher, and golden light spilled across the kitchen. It caught the edge of a spoon, bounced off a jar lid, and scattered across the countertop like a million stars. The willows watched, hearts still and full. It had become their morning tradition, a ritual not born from religion, but from reverence. Reverence for simplicity, for being present, for the vast, wild world just outside their window. And it was in these moments, more than any others, that they felt alive. Eventually, Elliot rose. "All right, explorers, we have a full day ahead." Today, they would begin what they called the home hunt. Each family member had chosen a possible location for their next permanent residence, and starting today, they would explore them all. Afterward, they would vote the Willow Way together as equals. But for now, there was breakfast to think about. "I'll check the crumb ledge," Nora offered, nodding toward a thin rail near the toaster, where stray bread bits sometimes landed. "I'll check the sugar jar," Theo said. Lila, bouncing on her heels, chimed in. "I'll check the cereal cliff. Sophie always drops pieces when she eats." They scattered like fireflies, leaping down the climbing string they'd looped around a chopstick wedged between the windowsill and counter edge. The rope swung gently as they descended, their version of a grand staircase. At the bottom, Elliot lingered for a moment, still looking out the window. He didn't say anything, but in his mind, a single thought echoed. Let them always remember this, that the best mornings aren't made of coffee or noise or screens. They're made of quiet sunrises, of warm hands, of shared silence, of wonder. He closed his eyes, just for a breath, and then turned to follow his family into the heart of the kitchen. A land of marble plains and spice-scented hills, toaster caverns and towering mugs. Today they would walk in sunlight. Today they would dream with open eyes. And somewhere beyond the butter dish and kettle spout, A home was waiting to be found. Whispers beneath the floorboards. A bedtime tale of the littlest hearts. The kitchen stretched out before them like a wide, unexplored continent, silent, sunlit, and promising. To the humans of the Marsh household, it was just another Tuesday morning. But to the Willow family, today marked the beginning of something sacred. The Great Exploration. A journey across porcelain fields, spice-scented ridges, and metallic cliffs. To find a place not just to rest, but to belong. Shoelaces tied? Elliot asked with a smile, though none of them wore shoes. Imaginary ones, yes, Theo answered, grinning. Lila raised her arms like wings. Let's fly. Their gear was already packed, the essentials at least. Each family member had a miniature satchel made from scraps of felt and bits of thread. Inside were treasures, paperclip hooks, thread spools, tiny maps sketched on the backs of postage stamps, and strings of knotted embroidery floss that served as climbing ropes. Elliot wore his usual explorer's vest, fashioned from a scrap of old glove. His 2 walking sticks, once toothpicks, now polished with years of use, jutted from a loop at his back. They had walked many miles with him. He tapped them twice against the edge of the sponge ledge, the way a captain might tap the hull of his ship before launch. "All right," he said. "First stop, my pick, the boiler cupboard." Nora tilted her head. "I thought we were starting with the spice rack?" He smiled. "Warmth first, flavor later." They laughed softly, a chorus of tiny voices, and began their descent. Their starting point was the tiled edge of the kitchen window. From there, they rappelled down a chain of knotted ribbon, each loop perfectly sized for their hands. Nora led the way, her feet landing gracefully on the butter dish lid. The rest followed with practiced ease. This wasn't their first ascent, after all. Their boots, made from stitched leather thimble scraps, touched down on the countertop, which gleamed like polished marble under the morning light. All around them, the kitchen was alive with scent. Cinnamon, citrus, and the distant sweetness of vanilla from a recently opened drawer. "Do you hear it?" Theo whispered, pausing. They all stopped. Yes, there it was, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft ticking of a wall clock, and beyond that, the rhythmic splash of the garden fountain. All familiar sounds, yes, but today they felt different. Today, they sounded like music. They made their way toward the stovetop, weaving between a pepper shaker and a ceramic sugar bowl. The terrain was smooth and slippery in places, and they held hands as they crossed a particularly glossy patch of tile that reflected their silhouettes like a frozen pond. When they reached the stovetop, Elliot motioned for them to pause. "Ready for the slide?" he asked. "Ready," the kids shouted in unison. The glass of the electric stove was cool and slick beneath their feet. Holding hands, the 4 of them skated across its surface, their laughter bouncing between the steel burners. It was their tradition, a moment of fun before the climb. And though it was playful, it also served a purpose. Trust. They moved like a single unit, spinning gently, sliding toward the far edge before slowing to a stop. "Whew," Lila said, breathless. "Still better than sledding down the napkin drawer." Theo winked. "Less crumbs, too." Beyond the stove was the microwave, a structure the Willows referred to as the Silver Mountain. Its curved roof rose high above the surrounding terrain, and atop it was the base of the cupboard where Elliot's chosen spot waited. "Ropes ready," Elliot called. From their packs, they each pulled out a length of knotted floss. At the end of each was a picture hook, bent just enough to grip a groove. Elliot threw his first. It caught on the microwave handle. He tested it, then climbed. Hand over hand, toe by toe, he ascended, the old rhythm of motion returning to his limbs like a lullaby. At the top, he stood tall, then reached down to help the others. From there, it was only one more climb, up into the cupboard. Elliot threw his final rope through a narrow slot at the back of the cupboard base. It snaked up into the shadows and disappeared. He gave it a tug, and somewhere above, the picture hook latched. "Secure," he whispered. He climbed, and as his fingers pulled him higher, his heart thudded with the familiar thrill of discovery. It never got old, this sense of venturing into the unknown. Even when the space turned out to be too cold or too loud, even when they were turned away by danger, the beginning of a search always carried something holy. He disappeared into the cupboard's dark mouth, and the others soon followed. Inside, it was warmer than expected. The space was dim, but not dark. It smelled of copper and clean air. And just ahead, nestled behind the great metal machine that heated the house, were piles of fluffy cotton pads arranged like couches, cushions, and tiny beds. "I knew it," Elliot whispered. "Perfect heat. Zero drafts." The others stared. Nora stepped forward first, pressing her hands into a cotton mound. It gave way like a marshmallow, soft and resilient. "This is..." She paused, eyes wide. "This is perfect." Elliot nodded. "I told you." He pulled out a small tin lid and placed it on one of the sofas. Then, from his pack, he removed 4 thimble-sized cups made of rolled foil, a speck of cocoa dust, a few drops of water, one moment near the boiler vent, hot chocolate. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, and it was made with love. They drank in silence. Around them, the cotton caught the heat like a soft cocoon. The boiler hummed gently, like a sleepy dragon breathing in its cave. Lila leaned against Theo. Nora rested her head on Elliot's shoulder. No one said it aloud, but they all thought it. This could be it. But as the last sips were taken and the tin cups put away, Nora stood. "One down," she said, smiling. "More to go," Theo added. "And maybe something even better," Lila said. Elliot gathered the ropes. "Let's find out." Whispers. Beneath the floorboards. A bedtime tale of the littlest hearts. The warmth wrapped around them like a blanket knit from golden light. The boiler cupboard had its own rhythm, a gentle hum, steady and reassuring. To a human, it was background noise, but to Elliot, it was a pulse, a reminder that something was alive in this home, something quiet and constant, like a heartbeat behind the walls. The willows sat among cotton balls and felt pads, nestled into nooks between loose bolts and pipes. The cotton had been gathered by Nora weeks ago, collected from under the dryer, and carefully cleaned with minty soap. She'd shaped each piece into something useful: armchairs, footrests, even a tiny ottoman stitched with thread. And now, here they were. It was the first place they'd explored that didn't feel temporary. Theo sat cross-legged beside the warmest vent, tracing shapes into the soft fluff with a strand of string. Lila stretched out with her head on a button cushion, eyes closed, cheeks pink from the heat. Nora leaned into Elliot's side, her voice low and kind. "You did well, El," she whispered. "This place feels real, like something we could build around." He didn't respond right away. He just held her hand and breathed in the soft air. It smelled like cotton, a trace of lemon, and a faint coppery warmth from the boiler's outer shell. It smelled like memories. "You know," he said after a moment, "when we lost the cupboard, I didn't feel sad. I felt guilty." Nora turned to him, surprised. "Guilty?" He nodded. "I kept thinking, we had everything. Safety, quiet, a home. And then, in one afternoon, it was all gone. I wondered if I should have prepared better, built extra routes, stockpiled more supplies, had some kind of backup plan." Nora's eyes softened. "Elliot, we lived there for 14 years. I know. That's what made it worse. We were so comfortable. I forgot the world could change." She rested her head against his. "Change doesn't mean failure. Sometimes, it just means the next chapter has begun." He let that settle. Her words always did that. Sink into the places where worry tried to grow. Across the room, Lila sat up. "Can we keep this one?" she asked, her voice small but hopeful. Theo chimed in. "Yeah, this place is great. It's warm, it's hidden, and the floor's like a cloud. What else do we need?" Elliot smiled at them both. "Well, let's not rush. We still have a few more places to see." "But this could be the winter room," Lila said, grinning. "You know, when it's snowing and we want cocoa all day." "Speaking of cocoa," Nora said, reaching for her foil kettle, "how about one more round?" The children cheered softly, and soon the scent of hot chocolate filled the cupboard again. With just a sliver of cocoa flake, a capful of water, and a flicker of steam from the boiler, she prepared 4 thimble-sized cups. She added a touch of peppermint, a trick she learned long ago from her grandmother, and passed them around carefully. They drank in silence, and in that silence, something sacred bloomed. It wasn't just the warmth of the air or the sweetness of the cocoa. It was the feeling of being wrapped in something familiar, something you don't have to earn, something you belong to, simply because you are loved. Home wasn't always made of walls. Sometimes it was made of moments like this. After the last sips were taken and tiny cups were stacked, Elliot stood and stretched. "All right, team," he said. "We've got another place to see. Nora's turn." "I was hoping you'd say that," she replied, brushing her skirt smooth. "Let me lead." Lila tugged on her shoelaces that weren't real. "Do we get to zipline again?" Theo laughed. "Only if Mom lets us." Nora winked. "Better hold on tight." With practiced grace, she threw a knotted string over the cupboard lip. It caught on the edge of the microwave below. Then she used a toothpick to fasten her waist harness, a design of her own, stitched from rubber bands and thread. She climbed over the ledge and stood tall. Then, with arms raised and her curls whipping back in the warm air, she leapt. The zip line hummed beneath her as she glided downward, elegant and fearless, like a dancer on air. She landed softly on the kitchen floor below, sliding slightly before coming to a graceful stop. Lila squealed, "That was amazing!" Theo didn't wait for a second call. He followed, then Lila, then Elliot, all zipping down one by one, their laughter rising like birdsong between the tiles. When they landed, they looked up at the massive kitchen around them, a towering forest of table legs and cabinet cliffs. The humans were still upstairs, the house quiet but for the occasional creak of wood or ticking clock. "We go to the sideboard next," Nora said. "You'll love it." "What's a sideboard?" Lila asked. Theo shrugged. "Sounds like a sideways skateboard." "It's where we'll have our next meal," Nora said with a grin. "You'll see." They began to walk, holding hands, their shadows long against the glowing tiles. Elliot glanced back at the boiler cupboard. the warmth already fading behind them. Maybe this wouldn't be their forever home, but maybe it would always be their refuge, their warmest place, their safest silence, the first place that reminded them they still had everything that mattered. And as they walked beneath the echoing hush of the kitchen table, with golden sunlight rippling around their feet, Elliot felt something he hadn't felt since the day they lost the cupboard. Hope. Whispers beneath the floorboards. A bedtime tale of the littlest hearts. To the average human, it was just a kitchen cabinet, but to Nora Willow, it was a treasure vault. She stood beneath the towering legs of the sideboard, one hand resting on her hip, the other clutching a polished toothpick like a baton. Sunlight from the kitchen window stretched across the floor, casting soft beams through the frosted glass panels of the cabinet doors. The air smelled faintly of honey and pine, scents left behind by the wood polish Emma Marsh had used the day before. "This way," Nora said confidently. Lila and Theo looked up in awe. The sideboard loomed like a cathedral. Its glass panes shimmered in the light, and inside the outline of porcelain plates and cups waited, their curves blurred like dream shapes behind fogged windows. "Middle door," Nora said, tapping the floor with her toothpick. "That's our entrance." "How do we get in?" Theo asked. "Like this." She grinned. With a running start, Nora vaulted herself into the air, catching a thin crack in the cabinet's frame. She pulled herself upward like a gymnast, then squeezed through a narrow gap where the glass didn't quite meet the wood. Her children stared, mouths slightly open. "Your turn," she called. They scrambled after her, Elliot lifting Lila gently before climbing in himself. And just like that, the Willows were inside. The world changed instantly. It was cool, quiet, and filled with light filtered through the milky glass. Around them stood mountains of fine china, ivory white bowls stacked like cliffs, teacups balanced like ancient ruins, and a wall of delicate saucers so thin they caught the light and glowed. Nora moved like a curator through a gallery, guiding her family between porcelain towers. "Some of these dishes are older than we are," she whispered. "Hand-painted, likely passed down through generations." Theo ran his hand along the curved rim of a teacup. "It's like walking on the edge of the moon." Lila stopped in front of a mirrored plate. Her reflection shimmered on its polished surface, small, brave, and smiling. "I look like an explorer," she whispered. "You are," Elliot said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're exploring a world most people never even notice." At the far end of the cabinet, a tiny table had already been set. It was made from a bottle cap flipped upside down, propped on thread spools. At its center was a single giant loop of chocolate cereal, a perfectly rounded O left behind by young Sophie Marsh during breakfast. The sweet smell hung in the air like a memory of childhood. Nora smiled proudly. "I found it yesterday. Sophie eats her cereal here, right beside this cupboard. And lucky for us, she's a wonderfully messy eater." Theo's eyes lit up. "This could feed us for a week." Lila ran to the table and circled it with excitement. "It's like a donut, a chocolate donut for giants." They sat around the makeshift table. No napkins, no silverware, just wide eyes and eager hands. Nora broke off pieces of the cereal loop and passed them around like a mother serving holiday pie. Each bite was crunchy and sweet, with hints of honey and cocoa. The taste brought something unexpected. Memories. Lila chewed slowly, then looked up. This reminds me of when we used to sit inside the tissue box, back in the old kitchen. Remember the jelly bean jar? Theo chuckled. That one green bean that lasted an entire month? And the marshmallow roof we built for my birthday, Nora added softly. Elliot closed his eyes. And the peppermint chip we saved for winter, broke it into crumbs and shared it by candlelight. The cabinet faded around them for a moment, replaced by those old familiar spaces, cramped but cozy, fragile but full of love. Though that home was gone, the taste of sweetness carried it forward. After breakfast, they leaned back, bellies full, hearts even fuller. I could live here, Lila murmured, licking a smear of chocolate from her fingertip. It's not as warm as the boiler room, Theo added, but it's brighter. It feels cheerful. Nora smiled, but said nothing. She wanted them to decide for themselves. She'd brought them here not to convince, but to show. To offer the possibility of comfort and joy in unexpected places. As the children explored the remaining shelves, climbing over spoon handles, peeking inside sugar bowls, Elliot took Nora's hand. You see things no one else sees, he whispered. Always have. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the glint of polished china. I just pay attention to what's already beautiful. Even now, after we've lost so much. Especially now, she replied. Their moment was interrupted by Lila's shout from above. Guys, come see this. She stood on a raised saucer platform near the back of the cabinet. As they climbed to her side, they saw what she had discovered. A set of ceramic egg cups lined neatly on a wooden tray, each one the perfect size for a tiny bed. There are 5, Lila said excitedly. 1 for each of us, and 1 spare for guests. Or a library, Theo added. I could sleep in one and keep books in another. Elliot laughed. Or use it as a cocoa pot. They spent a few more minutes exploring, imagining what the space could become. A dining hall, a lounge, a reading nook. It wasn't just shelter, it was potential. Eventually, they gathered their things. As they climbed down through the cupboard gap, back onto the tiled kitchen floor, they all looked up one last time. It's not forever, Nora said quietly. But it's joy, even if only for a little while. And sometimes she thought, that was enough. Whispers beneath the floorboards. A bedtime tale of the littlest hearts. The living room welcomed them like a warm breath. Gone was the thick burgundy carpet Nora never liked. In its place, stretched smooth mahogany floorboards, golden with sunlight, whispering beneath their feet with every step. The air here was different, not kitchen sweet, but rich with polish, cotton, and the faint scent of crayons. Theo led the way. He didn't speak much as they walked, his eyes fixed on something only he could see ahead. The others followed his pace without question. They'd come to recognize this look, the soft squint, the slow breath, the way his fingers gently tapped at his sides as if following music only he could hear. Lila tilted her head toward Elliot. Where do you think he's going? Elliot only smiled. Wherever it is, it'll be beautiful. They stepped around the base of the coffee table, a towering mesa with carved wooden legs and decorative trim. Theo didn't pause. He began the climb with purpose, looping a strand of floss around a drawer knob and ascending in smooth, practiced rhythm. The rest followed. And when they reached the top, they saw it. A fish tank. But not just any tank. This one glowed. It sat in the center of the table like a sunken city encased in glass. Its corners shimmered with reflections from the window. Inside, tendrils of green drifted like underwater trees. Pieces of driftwood curled in strange, beautiful shapes, and smooth stones lined the bottom like sleeping giants. Fish of every color darted between the shadows. Theo stepped forward slowly, then sank into a carved indentation in the wood, a shallow groove, perfectly shaped like a seat for someone his size. The others joined him without speaking. It felt wrong to interrupt the stillness. Inside the tank, a blue fish flickered past, quick as a thought. A school of silver flashes followed, then scattered like dandelion seeds caught in wind. "I come here most nights," Theo finally said, his voice a whisper. "While Sophie and Emma watch television, they never notice." "You've kept this secret?" Lila asked, amazed. He nodded. "Not because I didn't want to share it. I just wasn't ready to explain how it makes me feel." He pointed to a particular fish, red, elegant, trailing long petal-like fins behind her as she moved. "I call her Rose," he said, "because of her color and the way she moves, like a flower in water." The family leaned in. Rose swam past again, circling the driftwood with grace, her fins rippling like silk. She was unlike any of the others, slower, gentler, like she was dancing through a dream. "She's beautiful," Nora whispered. Theo's eyes softened. "She doesn't rush, she doesn't dart like the others, she glides." Elliot rested a hand on Theo's back. "Is this your pick for our new home?" Theo nodded. "I know it's not as warm as the boiler, or as sweet as the cupboard, but it's alive, every second. Something moves, something glows." He gestured to the lower corner of the tank. "There's even space below the stand. We could build under there, maybe hang hammocks between the table legs. At night, we could climb up here and just sit." Lila tilted her head. "Would we have fish friends?" Theo grinned. "Rose would be our neighbor." The others laughed gently, but no one teased. They all felt it too, that hush in the heart when something unexpectedly sacred appears. This wasn't just a tank. It was a window into another rhythm, a slower, softer world. Nora leaned forward. "What do you love most about it?" Theo thought for a long moment. "I think," he began, then paused again. "It makes me feel small, but not in a scary way, in a safe way, like I'm part of something too big to worry about, something already moving, flowing, that doesn't need me to control it." Silence followed, and in that silence, bubbles rose inside the tank, catching the sunlight and drifting upward like lanterns. "I used to be afraid of being small," he added, "like I had to prove something all the time. But when I'm here, I feel like it's okay to just be, to listen, to watch." Elliot swallowed, a lump forming in his throat. "That," he said quietly, "might be the most important reason of all." They stayed there for a while, watching Rose circle the driftwood again. Occasionally, a flash of green or gold would cross the tank, and they'd smile or point. But mostly, they just breathed. The kind of breath that doesn't try to be deep. It just is. Eventually, Lila stood. "Okay," she said gently. "We've seen the warmest place, the sweetest place, and now, the calmest." Nora nodded. "And still one more to go." Everyone turned to look at her. Lila grinned. "Me?" The family's eyes lit up. They had almost forgotten. "I've saved the best for last," she said with mock drama, folding her arms. Theo looked skeptical. "Better than a chocolate breakfast and a fish ballet?" Lila winked. "You'll see." She turned away from the tank, bouncing lightly on her toes as she moved toward the edge of the table. But before she dropped down to the floor, she turned back, just for a second, and met Theo's gaze. "Rose is lovely," she said softly, "and your heart sees beautifully." Theo smiled. "So does yours." And with that, she was gone, leaping down onto the mahogany floor, landing like a whisper. The others followed. As they crossed the sunlit boards, the fish tank shimmered behind them, a silent sea of color and calm. Theo didn't look back. He didn't need to, because something inside him had already changed. He had found his rhythm, his stillness, his place of breath. Even if they chose somewhere else in the end, this would always be his. Whispers beneath the floorboards, a bedtime tale of the littlest hearts. The floor stretched before them like the hallway of a palace. Lila was unusually quiet as she led the way, which, for Lila, meant something special was coming. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of mischief that only comes from holding a magnificent secret just long enough. Theo jogged to catch up. "Where are we going?" She didn't answer, just flashed a knowing smile. The Willow family followed her through shafts of sunlight, across the polished floorboards of the living room. They stepped carefully around crayons and a single pink sock, discarded during Sophie's last play session. The air still held a faint trace of crayon wax and vanilla, scents that, to Lila, always meant magic. They turned the corner of the coffee table and circled the massive leather sofa. And then they saw it. Against the far wall, nearly brushing the sofa arm, stood a dollhouse. No, not just a dollhouse. A mansion. 3 stories tall, with a pink shingled roof, open sides like a theater set, and rooms that gleamed with miniature furniture. A kitchen with silver utensils, a dining room with a chandelier, a living room with floral armchairs, and bedrooms with real stitched bedding. The Willow family froze. Lila turned around slowly, unable to stop smiling. "Told you," she whispered. For a moment, no one moved. Then Elliot gave a low, awed whistle. "Well," he said, "I stand humbly corrected." Nora stepped forward, like someone approaching a sacred relic. This is unbelievable." Theo ran his hand along a banister. "It's fully furnished. There's even electricity," Lila said, pointing to a tiny switch on the wall. "I saw the lights come on yesterday." Theo gasped. "It lights up?" Lila nodded, bouncing slightly. "Every room. And there's more." She ducked around the back of the dollhouse and came back rolling a tiny object, a remote-controlled car, bright blue with yellow stripes. Its size, to the Willows, was perfect, like a family van for their scale. "We could drive this," Lila said proudly. "I've already checked the battery. Sophie never remembers to turn it off, so it still works." Elliot crouched beside it. "We could load supplies, cocoa, cereal, even tools." Theo grinned. "We could drive to the aquarium, or the cupboard, or the window in the morning." Nora touched the steering wheel gently. "It's perfect." Lila beamed, cheeks glowing. "I knew you'd like it." They gathered at the dollhouse doorway, looking inside. Every floor was meticulously decorated, from the tiny picture frames on the wall to the flower pots by the windows. The upstairs bedrooms had soft pillows, layered blankets, and even drawers that opened. The closets held doll clothes the size of leaf petals. In one corner sat a reading lamp smaller than a spool of thread. "There's a room for each of us," Lila said, "and we wouldn't have to imagine it this time. It's already real." Elliot rested a hand on her back. "You found something extraordinary, Lila." Nora turned to her daughter, her voice thick. "How did you even discover this?" Lila's eyes danced. "Last week, Sophie dropped her hair clip behind the couch. She went looking for it and didn't notice when the dollhouse door opened a crack. I was nearby. I couldn't help myself." She looked down for a moment, then back up. "I explored it for 3 days. Every stair, every room. I cleaned the dust, fixed the broken chair leg. I wanted it to be ready." Theo's mouth fell open. "You fixed furniture?" She grinned. "With bubblegum glue and a shard of popsicle stick." They all burst out laughing, not just at the cleverness, but at the wonder of her heart, the preparation, the care. She hadn't just found a place, she had loved it into readiness. "Come on," she said, leading them in. They stepped across the threshold and into the parlor room. To their left, the fireplace was painted brick red with tiny logs stacked inside. To the right, a miniature couch with floral stitching and a matching rug. Up the staircase, narrow but climbable, the bedrooms waited. "This is the one I picked for Theo," Lila said, pointing. "It has the best view of the aquarium. And this one," she gestured to a cozy alcove under the eaves, "is mine. It catches the morning sun." Elliot's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Lila, this is more than a house." She looked at him, unsure. "It's a home," he said. The others nodded. The truth hung in the air like warm air from a vent. They didn't need to vote. Not this time. They gathered on the top floor, sitting in a circle on the plush rug in the master bedroom, now their shared family space until the other rooms were fully claimed. Outside the dollhouse, the light dimmed as the afternoon softened into early evening. "We'll still visit the other places," Theo said. "The cupboard, the tank. We'll always have the boiler in winter," Nora added. "And the windowsill at sunrise," Elliot finished. Lila hugged her knees. "But we'll come home here." Silence, peaceful, fulfilling. Elliot reached into his pack and pulled out a folded cloth, a tiny flag sewn from ribbon scraps. He planted it in the corner of the rug, then smiled. "Home," he said. The family leaned back, letting the quiet sink into their bones. Beneath them, the dollhouse was sturdy. Around them, every detail had already been built with love, and within them, something ancient and soft stirred, a knowing. They had wandered, they had lost, and now they had found. The smallest family in the house had just discovered the greatest gift of all, belonging. Whispers beneath the floorboards. A bedtime tale of the littlest heart's night had begun to whisper across the sky. From the tiny windows of the dollhouse, the world outside looked bathed in lavender. The setting sun scattered its last golden threads through the glass, casting delicate shadows on the floorboards of the Marsh family's living room. Inside the dollhouse, the willows were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that came from tired feet or full bellies, but the kind that comes when something meaningful hangs in the air, waiting to be named. They sat together in the parlor, circled around a sewing button table, each one holding a scrap of folded paper. On each scrap, they had written, in graphite from the tip of a pencil lead, their final choice for where they wished to live. Not a vote of competition, a vote of hearts. Theo held his paper close, not because he wasn't sure, but because it felt sacred somehow. Lila tapped hers lightly on her palm, unable to contain her bubbling anticipation. Nora and Elliot exchanged a look, a soft, smiling glance that said, "Whatever happens next, we've already won." Elliot leaned forward. "This is the way we always decide," he said gently. "Each voice matters. No one louder, no one smaller, just truth." Lila beamed. "Can I go first?" Elliot chuckled. "We'll all reveal them together." He counted. 3, 2, 1. They unfolded. Silence. And then, laughter. Gentle, disbelieving, full-hearted laughter. Every scrap read the same word. Dollhouse. Theo smiled softly. "I loved the aquarium. It made me feel still. But this makes me feel home." Nora nodded. The cupboard was sweet and simple, but it asked us to imagine the rest. This place already loves us back. Elliot looked around, at the chairs already waiting for them, the lights already wired, the beds already made. "And we deserve something that feels ready," he said. "After everything we've lost, we deserve a home that welcomes us." Lila didn't say anything right away. Her eyes shimmered, not just from the light, but from something deeper. "I picked it," she whispered, "but I didn't know if you'd want it too. I didn't want it just to be my dream." Theo leaned in. "Lila, it was never just your dream." She looked at them, then at the tiny chandelier above them, dangling like a frozen firework. She had dusted that herself, with a bristle from Sophie's paintbrush. "Then let's begin," she said, standing. The family followed her lead. Together, they moved room to room, assigning spaces, imagining where they'd place hooks and storage, how they'd store food in the bottom drawer of the doll wardrobe. The attic would be Elliot's study. Nora would turn the sunroom into a kitchen. Theo wanted to build a shelf for books. Postage stamp journals he'd kept since before the move. Lila? She claimed the upstairs bedroom with a scalloped pink quilt. "Each of us," Elliot said, "gets our own corner of the world. But we'll always share the center," Nora added, "the place we gather." In the kitchen, they found a tiny oven that didn't work, but had just enough space for dry storage. Lila turned a plastic cupcake into a hat rack. Theo used a twist tie to construct a working latch for the toy fridge door. Nora smoothed the bedspreads. Elliot reinforced the railings on the staircase using threads and bent wire. The dollhouse, once a display, was becoming theirs. And outside, the world dimmed into indigo. Far above, the Marsh family had turned on the TV, its glow flickering across the ceiling. The rumble of distant dialogue vibrated faintly through the walls, a reminder that while the willows had found stillness, the giants still moved. But that didn't bother them. They had something better than silence. They had belongings. Later, as the first stars appeared through the dollhouse windows, the willows sat once more at the button table. This time, there was no ceremony, just cocoa. Nora had brewed the last of their peppermint cocoa in a foil thimble over the tea light heater they had salvaged from Sophie's playset. She poured it gently into each cup, lids from ink pens, hollowed bolts, and the bottom half of a plastic cap. They toasted. "To new beginnings," Elliot said. "To the old memories that brought us here," Nora added. Theo held up his cup. "To fish who swim like flowers." Lila lifted hers last. "To tiny hearts, and the homes that finally hear them." The warm drink filled them, not just their bodies, but their bones, their stories, the quiet, aching places that had waited so patiently for peace. And afterward, one by one, they went to bed. Theo curled beneath a walnut shell tray. a makeshift canopy above his head. Lila climbed into her doll bed, tracing the stars through the window pane. Nora and Elliot slipped into the master room, not out of grandeur, but because it was closest to the hallway. Parents always slept closest to the door. Before lights out, Elliot peeked into each room, checked their ropes, listened for leaks, adjusted the miniature curtains to hide their home from human eyes. Then he returned to Nora. They lay still for a while. "Did you ever think we'd find it again?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away, but then, "No, I didn't. I hoped, but I didn't dare to believe." Nora turned to him in the dark. "We're here now." He nodded. "And we're whole." From the hallway came the sound of Sophie's laughter, muffled, sweet, untouched by sorrow. The girl they'd never meet, but who had unknowingly given them shelter. The dollhouse stood quietly beneath the sofa's shadow, aglow, complete, alive. Inside it, 4 tiny hearts beat in rhythm. Not hidden, not lost, but home. Whispers beneath the floorboards. A bedtime tale of the littlest hearts. It was the kind of night that hushed even the stars. Outside the dollhouse windows, the world rested under a blanket of silver moonlight. A breeze moved gently through the trees beyond the glass, rustling the branches like soft whispers of blessing. The Marsh home had gone quiet. The television turned off, the footsteps stilled, the lights dimmed. Upstairs, Sophie Marsh slept curled with her favorite stuffed bear, unaware that just beneath her living room sofa, an entire world had settled into peace. Inside the dollhouse, the Willows were home. It didn't happen all at once. That feeling of rootedness, it came in slow, quiet pieces, in the softness of the bed under Theo's back, in the way Lila's pink bedroom curtains danced slightly when the floor above creaked, in the sound of Elliot and Nora whispering at night, not with worry, but with warmth. Home had returned to them, not as a place, but as a presence. Lila was the last to fall asleep that night. She lay beneath her tiny blanket, staring up at the plastic stars glued to her dollhouse ceiling, some peeling at the corners, some placed crooked, but all glowing softly in the dark. She didn't mind that they weren't perfect. They felt just right. From her bed, she could hear the fountain outside, muffled by walls and distance, but still constant, like a heartbeat, echoing through the soil. She thought about everything they'd seen in their search. The warmth of the boiler room, the sweetness of the cupboard, the stillness of the aquarium. Each place had offered a piece of comfort, a shard of hope, but none of them had offered all of it. Until now. She smiled, pulled the covers tighter, and whispered into the dark, "Thank you." The words weren't meant for anyone in particular. Maybe for Sophie, maybe for God, maybe just for the house itself. Down the hallway, Theo stirred in his bed. He had fallen asleep with a pencil shard in one hand and a folded stamp in the other. His latest book. Before drifting off, he had written a single line across the tiny paper. "We have become something more than small. We have become whole." In the master room, Elliot and Nora lay side by side, their hands entwined between the layers of thread-wrapped bedding. Elliot whispered into the dark, "We made it." Nora turned toward him, brushing her fingertips along his cheek. "We never left," she murmured. "We just needed time to remember where we belonged." And in that moment, all the fears, all the what-ifs, All the echoes of cardboard boxes and empty cupboards faded into stillness, because this was where the story turned. Not the end, but the beginning, the true beginning. A place to build routines again, to make new memories, to mark time with birthday sprinkles and rainy day dances and Sunday cocoa beneath a dollhouse chandelier. The next morning, light filtered through the dollhouse windows like golden ribbons. The air held the scent of polish and dust, familiar now, like the smell of home after being away too long. Theo was the first to rise. He crept out of bed and padded down the hallway in socked feet, passing Lila's door, then the tiny bookshelf he had arranged with thimbles and paper scrolls. He stepped into the kitchen and found his father already there, standing at the tiny plastic counter, watching sunlight crawl across the floor. "You're up early," Elliot said softly. Theo nodded. "I couldn't sleep. My head was full." Elliot turned. "Full of what?" Theo looked around at the doll-sized oven, the stickered refrigerator, the tea towels made from Sophie's old shirt scraps. "Gratitude," he said. Elliot didn't speak, but his eyes glistened. He poured 2 thimble cups of warm water from the kettle they kept above the nightlight's heating element and added a sliver of cocoa. The peppermint was gone now, used up in celebration, but plain was enough. Plain, Theo thought, could still be perfect. They sat together on bottle-cap stools and sipped quietly. Soon, Lila padded in, hair tousled, arms stretching wide. "Morning," she whispered, climbing into a chair. Behind her came Nora, wrapped in a cloth robe stitched from felt. She kissed each child on the forehead, then leaned into Elliot's side. Their home, the one they'd lost, had once been a dark box behind a cupboard. But this new home, it had windows. It had rooms filled with color, walls that invited joy, and space enough for dreams. It was made not of survival, but of delight. Later that day, they would take the car and visit the window again. Theo would read beside the fountain. Lila would press her nose against the glass and call the garden a forest of kings. Nora would collect crumbs Sophie left behind, and Elliot would fix the curtain hook by the porch room. They would live, not just quietly, but fully. And in the evenings, after cocoa and giggles and bedtime stories, they would gather in the parlor beneath the tiny chandelier and remember that they were once lost, but now they were home, not just within the dollhouse, not just beneath the sofa, but within each other. 4 tiny souls, one great love, whispers beneath the floorboards, a family, finally whole. And so, in the quiet hum beneath a sofa, beneath footsteps and coffee cups, and the laughter of a little girl, a tiny family finally found their forever place. They may be small, but in their courage, in their love, they reminded us of something we so often forget. That home is not always where you start, but where your heart chooses to rest. Thank you for listening, and wherever you are tonight, may you rest easy, and may your heart find its own little corner of peace. Soft music fades. Screen transitions to black or end screen.